Instructional design is a great career with plenty of opportunity, but is it right for you? In this video, I'm going to ask you over 10 questions to help you learn more about what it's like to work as an ID, as well as figure out whether or not you will thrive as an instructional designer. So let's dive right into it with the first question, which is, do you like to help people learn? And this may seem obvious because it is a learning profession, but there is some nuance to this. So overall, ID, one of the best careers for people who are passionate about teaching, education, and helping people learn, because that's the whole goal of an instructional designer, is to help people learn more efficiently and have a better time doing it. So the flip side here is that you will likely be behind the scenes. So you're not necessarily going to be in front of a classroom or in front of an audience teaching people face to face. You're probably going to be behind the scenes designing self-paced e-learning, writing storyboards and scripts and like learning plans. So it's kind of more like lesson planning more than like standing in front of a live audience teaching. So the good part of that is that the work that you do can reach far more people than if you were having to stand in front of them live. So you could design a solution that's seen by hundreds or thousands or millions of people. So you can help a lot more people at scale, but you may not be like in front of them to see those aha moments in the same classroom, for example. So you can reach a ton of people, but it will be a slightly different experience. There are some ID roles where you will be doing like the training as well. So where you are designing the solution and then actually delivering it or facilitating it to an audience, whether it's like in a webinar format or in a live session. But this is definitely not the norm for most of the ID opportunities out there. All right, next question for you is, do you like to use computers or technology or software? So are you tech savvy, or are you interested in becoming tech savvy? The reason for this is that ID is a very software heavy field, especially because of e-learning. So e-learning was really popular when I was getting back into the field in 2017. That has pretty much exploded since 2020 with COVID and everyone moving to remote, people transitioning so much of their face-to-face learning to self-paced e-learning. So huge demand for people who actually know the tool set to be able to create that self-paced e-learning. And that is why the opportunities in this field have been like getting, there are plenty of opportunities in this field, especially in the e-learning space. So there are some roles where you can focus more on the consulting and the writing and like the instructional design front end piece, but these roles aren't as prevalent, especially these days. I mean, even if you are good at those pieces and you want to focus more on those pieces, it doesn't hurt to know the tools and to show off the tech skills, because that will open so many more doors. And even if you are doing the front end work, it helps to like know how the technology works, just so that you know what people down the line will be able to create, and you know what the designs you are doing, like whether or not they'll be able to actually be brought into life like on time and on budget. So yeah, you can land opportunities if you don't want to touch the technology, but you're going to probably have a much more difficult time just because of the state of the field right now. So if you're tech savvy, this is a great field for you. Do you like working with children? I ask this because a lot of people coming into the field are coming from education, and a lot of people went into education because they like to work with children. So the reality is most instructional designers are designing learning experiences for adults. A lot of it is like in the corporate learning setting. We're designing for full-time employees who are on the job. Again, there are some opportunities to design learning for children, teens, and even young adults, especially in college settings. And I've had clients reach out to me about opportunities for like, younger children, elementary school aged, like big projects that would reach like millions of children. So there are definitely organizations out here doing this kind of work who need instructional designers. But if you like working with children in their most formative years, and that is very, very important to you, then ID may not be the best career for you just because of the sheer number of opportunities. So like same thing how I was saying about the technology. It's like you can find roles where you don't have to use the technology, but the proportions are just like so disproportionate. And it's like that too with like working with children. Most of the learning experiences for the opportunities out there will be for adults. So next question I have for you is whether or not you like variety. If so, long story short, ID is a great field for you because instructional designers can work in a range of industries on a range of different projects with a range of different skills. For example, I've worked with clients in healthcare, in the tech space, in the mining and agriculture spaces. And this is all like in a given year. I can work on all of these different projects. And the projects range from like sales simulations to software training to technical, highly technical, like medical, like continuing education credit projects. So tons and tons of variety. And of course you can like specialize in specific types of projects or in specific industries. And if you are working a full-time job, the topics may be more similar, but if in the healthcare industry, for example, you may be working on like an HR software tutorial one week and like, some actual technical medical training for doctors the following week. And the teams may be specialized. It of course varies from organization to organization, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb that you're going to have a lot of variety in the ID space, especially with the different skills you use, right? So like you might be writing one day, interviewing people the next day, and then working in software and like software that's similar to PowerPoint the day after that. So even the skills you use, if the other things are constant, will vary so much. So caveat, as with all of these, you can likely find roles without a lot of variety where you are just doing like the same thing day in and day out. Like I'm imagining like a developer heavy role, for example. You may just be developing e-learning and authoring tools all day, but this is not the norm, and you will need to actively seek out roles like this if you don't want a lot of variety. Okay, next question for you is whether you want room for growth. So ID is interesting in this space. Since ID is so interdisciplinary and there are so many different skills that are valuable in the instructional design field, there are plenty of opportunities to specialize and increase your earning potential. So for example, I found out pretty early on in this field that I loved the development side of things. So I started developing more complex interactions. I started learning like custom code and how to like incorporate that into the projects. And it was like pretty specialized stuff. Like most IDs are like never having to use these skills, but I was like, I'm passionate about this. I'm going to focus on my own professional development and just try to make this stuff work. And then even though the field is so broad, I went like really deep into that development aspect, and I started landing some of my most profitable projects ever, just because there weren't many other people in the space who have that skill set and can talk about it in instructional design terms and solve ID problems with it. So you can do the same thing with analysis skills, design skills, writing or storytelling skills, and the list goes on. I'm sure there are dozens or hundreds of skills like this, where if you were to specialize in them, you would be able to vastly increase your earning potential. And not just for like freelance work, but also if someone has an opening on their team and they need an ID with a very specific skill set to solve a very specific problem for them, if you have that skill set and you can demonstrate it, and not many other IDs do, you will be able to demand much better offers than someone with a more general skill set. So you are very in control of your own professional development that way. So there's a lot of growth potential without necessarily moving into like people management roles, which is another option and the route that some people take. But very cool because you do have a lot of impact and control over your own professional development based on your interests and what you want to be better at. All right, do you want to work corporate? Okay, so most people coming into the ID space do want to work in corporate roles because there is so much opportunity right now, and all signs are pointing to that opportunity continuing to expand. It does have the highest earning potential out of like government, corporate, and higher and the education space, and it has the lowest barrier to entry. So you don't need like a master's degree or any certificates or certifications. You basically like need a bachelor's degree, and I think around 1 in 10 working IDs don't even have a bachelor's degree. And then you need to show off that you have the skills in like a portfolio, but yeah, lowest barrier to entry. It's basically like the lowest barrier to entry and the highest reward from like a financial and flexibility perspective. Now, the flip side of this is that people without corporate experience may or often do feel intimidated by like the corporate culture. I think a lot of people, especially transitioning from education, have this idea of this like corporate machine that's going to like work you to the bone, like chew you up and spit you out. And it's going to be like really impersonal, and like you're not going to really like matter, have a lot of autonomy. And that's not the reality. People working in these corporations, they do still care about their teams. There still is like that collaborative atmosphere on a lot of teams. As an instructional designer, you will have a decent amount of autonomy and how you want to bring that project to life. You can, of course, vet out these different companies. Like as you're interviewing, the corporate culture will vary from company to company. So there isn't this like one de facto corporate culture that's going to like tear you down. And of course, there will be an adjustment period. Like as if someone were going from corporate to the education space, there's going to be an adjustment period. But yeah, you're definitely capable of doing it. People expect that when they have a new hire, that there will be like an onboarding period as they learn the corporate culture, learn the lingo. And even if you're going from one company to another company, there's still going to be differences in culture. There's still going to be that onboarding period. So you don't necessarily need to feel intimidated by the corporate side of things. And of course, there are opportunities in education and in government. But again, this is the lowest barrier to entry. This is where a lot of people start, especially because a lot of people want that flexibility and earning potential, which is so prevalent in the corporate space. All right. Next question, and this is probably one of the most important ones, is whether or not you have time to upskill. So if you want to be competitive in this market, there are a lot of skills to learn, and it is going to take some time. So if you're looking for a career where you can just, maybe change a couple things on your resume and start throwing it out there and getting an interview and getting a job, this is not the career for you. We'll get into why in a minute, but this isn't like education or other fields where you get a very specific like certification or pass a specific test, and then you're like, okay, I'm certified. They're going to want me, like I'm going to be able to get a job. This is not like that at all. Your merit is based on your skills in the ID space, especially in the corporate and freelance ID spaces. So part of the reason for that is because this field is very crowded, and it's been getting more crowded over the past few years. And notice I say crowded and not saturated. And the reason for that is because there has been, and there probably always will be a shortage of skilled IDs. So if you do build the skills and you do create a portfolio to show off those skills, you're going to open up the market to you, and it's not going to be like you're playing the lottery or having to get lucky. So there is an approach to be able to land those roles really efficiently and effectively and to get those interviews at a high rate. But if you don't have a portfolio and you can't demonstrate these skills, then it's going to be kind of like playing the lottery. So you're going to be, throwing out your resume to 100 roles, maybe getting an interview or two, and having a probably hard time actually landing an offer unless you know someone who can influence that decision. So that's the difference here. You need a portfolio that shows off these skills, not a certificate or certification. And there are a variety of ways you can learn those skills. There are certificate programs, online courses, YouTube videos, there are so many, and then just practicing, opening the tools and figuring it out themselves. I mean, there's a lot more content on the channel I'll introduce you to later that will actually help you with learning these skills. But yeah, there's no specific certification process to get the stamp of approval to land a job. So you will need to take some time upskilling. With the people I work with, and what I generally see is it takes around 6 months of steady upskilling to build the skills, build the portfolio, and then actually be application ready and start getting offers from those interviews. So 6 months, general average timeline. Some people do it in half the time, who are more accelerated or who do get a little bit lucky. And some people take twice as long. So it could take up to a year. And some people who don't build their portfolio or build these in-demand skills and just try with what they've got, they can be on I've heard from people who say they've been applying to ID roles for 2 years without success before they come to me and ask for help. So yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time. It's not going to be something you're going to be getting a role in next month. I mean, it could happen if you get lucky, but I would not count on that. Next question I have for you is whether or not you like to work with people. So this is a people profession. You're probably not going to be working in a bubble, or I would say you most definitely are not going to be working in a bubble. Instructional designers on a weekly basis are working with subject matter experts to, get information that they need to design their training or learning experiences. They're going to be working with other instructional designers to collaborate, hand things off to each other, work together. They'll be working with the clients to learn more about what they need and how they can best serve them. And they'll be working with people in their audience to learn more about the perspective of the person who you're actually designing the learning experience for. And there may be more people too. So there are a lot of different stakeholders and people that instructional designers work with. There's a lot of collaboration and group problem solving going on. There is a lot of solo work as well. So it may be Monday, Tuesday, you're in a lot of meetings and working with people. And then the next couple of days, you may be heads down, kind of working on your own stuff before you bring it back to the team and get their feedback or input. Of course, it depends on the team, but I don't want you to think that you're going to be talking to people 8 hours a day, because there is a healthy balance. You may be able to find roles that are more on the solitary side, especially I feel development focused roles could be like this, but this is not the norm. So again, there are because, you know, the instructional designer job title isn't just like a single role or a single set of tasks. It does vary so much team to team, org to org. That's why I say a lot of like, this depends. Like you may be able to find a role like this. Like this isn't unheard of, but the standard ID role, you are going to be working with people in some capacity. Okay, next question I have for you is, how important is earning potential to you? ID has good earning potential, comfortable earning potential, but not as high as some fields like software engineering or cybersecurity. If you're looking for a guaranteed 6-figure job, like no question about it, this isn't the field for you. It is probably the highest paying or most well compensated learning profession, which is very attractive to a lot of people. But the average earnings in the US from the latest survey that we've conducted are around $85,500 per year. So it's not bad. It is respectable, and 6-figure roles are not unheard of, especially out of the gate. So on that survey where we found out the average salary, we found that around a quarter of those instructional designers working in the US are earning 6 figures per year. And then people I've worked with in my programs and stuff, and I am very involved with their process, it's definitely not uncommon for them to land 6-figure offers out of the gate, especially considering total compensation. So, and that's transitioning in from teaching high school, teaching English as a second language, professors. So it is possible, but yeah, around 80 to 85 grand, that is where we're seeing a lot of people start in the corporate space in the US. So pretty decent earning potential. I mean, I was earning 6 figures as a freelancer. That's pretty common once you get your footing as a freelancer, when your first year or two in the field, once you get the hang of things. So yeah, pretty good earning potential, but I haven't heard of instructional designers earning like multiple 6 figures. Like, you know, like there are some software engineers making like $400K a year at Google or $600K a year and so on and so forth. I haven't really heard of any IDs doing that in full-time jobs, at least. I've definitely heard of freelancers making it multiple 6 figures a year. All right, next up, how important is work-life balance to you? So this may be one of the main reasons you're pursuing instructional design, especially if you're coming from an education or teaching focused career where you are like overworked so much. That's why I decided to go this route, because I was looking at teaching high school English or pursuing a PhD and trying to become an English professor. But when I found out about instructional design, and I'm like, wait, these two careers like are notoriously going to overwork you, and you're like, it's going to take over your nights and weekends. And then instructional design, everyone's talking about how great their work-life balance is, and there's like better earning potential. I think I'm going to go that direction and help people learn that way. So that's what brought me to this field. Is what brings a lot of people to this field. It's why this is basically the most popular career for former teachers and educators. So in our recent survey, 94% of instructional designers are either satisfied or very satisfied with their work-life balance. No more working nights and weekends. That's what brings a lot of people to this field, as long as it checks all the other boxes. And there may be exceptions to this on some teams. There may be some push sprint periods where you're like working like up to 50 hours a week or so, but that is definitely not the norm. I haven't talked to many. I don't know if I've talked to any IDs who are like regularly working over 40 hours a week, unless it's by their own choice. And then it's cool too, because you can get a lot of time back in your life from your commute, because there are so many remote and freelance opportunities in this space. I've always worked remote in this space, and that was before COVID. Since COVID, the number of remote opportunities has just like exploded, because this work is so easy to do from like a laptop or from your computer. There's really no need to be doing this in person, unless you're going to like observe your audience like on site in the setting they're going to be working. So if you have your heart set on landing a remote role and you put the time into upskilling, you're going to be able to do that without too much trouble in the instructional design space. And then finally, the last question I have for you here is, do you like to learn? May seem obvious, but because there are so many different areas to specialize, instructional design is an amazing field for lifelong learners. You're going to need to learn skills to do your job, learn entirely new subjects from your subject matter experts. Like you might be learning about engineering. Yeah, I've learned about so many about so many different random subjects that I never thought I would learn about, just because I'm training on those topics, and your job is essentially to learn so that you can then teach. You're going to need to learn to keep up with the field, and you're going to need to lead by example so that your audience can see you being a lifelong learner, your peers or coworkers. It's going to help set that example, because you want them to be lifelong learners as well. So if you do like to learn, then you are definitely in the right place, especially if instructional design sounds like a good field for you. Because I do have a ton of content on this channel to help you out. I mean, I've been creating videos for at least a couple of years now to help people build their ID skills and land better opportunities. I have a full Become an Instructional Designer playlist, so definitely check that one out here on YouTube if you are trying to become an instructional designer, or even if you've recently landed a role and want to like make sure you have all of your bases covered. And then if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to be up to date with all of my newest stuff, feel free to subscribe because I post new content every single week. So thanks for making it to the end. Keep me posted on your instructional design journey, and I will see you in the next video.